You know that feeling when you're a kid and a teacher says field trip, and your whole body just lights up? That's how it started for me. I was 12 years old, and this was supposed to be the best day of 6th grade. It all started at Miller's Creek State Forest on October 14th, and it's the reason I still can't step into a forest without my hands shaking. Our school did this every year. A nature immersion day, they called it. 40 kids, 4 teachers, 2 park rangers, all hiking a marked trail through 600 acres of pine and oak. I'd done it in 4th grade too. Nothing ever happened. It was boring, actually. Bug spray and granola bars and a park ranger pointing at deer tracks. This time was different. We started at 9 in the morning. I was near the back of the line with my friend Dylan. We were talking about a video game, not paying attention to anything, just walking and laughing the way kids do when they don't know yet that a day can turn on you. Around 11, the trail split. One path kept going straight, marked with the little yellow Forest Service signs. The other went down toward the creek, steeper, muddier, unmarked. Our teacher, Mrs. Kessler, told us we were staying on the main trail. No creek path today. That's when Dylan needed to pee, bad. He asked Mrs. Kessler if he could step off the trail for a second. She said fine, quick, right there, don't go far. Dylan walked a few steps behind some trees while I stayed nearby on the edge of the trail, waiting for him. The rest of our class kept moving, slow and steady, farther up the path. Dylan finished up and we turned to head back, and the group was gone. Not far gone. We could still hear voices, faint, moving away up the trail. We started walking toward the sound, except the ground sloped different than I remembered, and there was a fallen tree blocking the exact spot we'd walked through minutes before. We went around it, then around a thicket of brush. Then the voices got quieter instead of louder. I want you to understand something about forests that you don't understand until it happens to you. Every direction looks the same. Every gap between trees looks like the path you came from. We called out. Nobody called back. The wind was moving the trees just enough that our voices probably didn't carry the way we thought they did. 15 minutes turned into 40, 40 into an hour. Dylan started crying, trying to hide it, wiping his face like I wouldn't notice. I wasn't much better. And then we heard something that wasn't wind and wasn't birds. An engine. Far off, but an engine, which meant a road, which meant we weren't as deep in as I'd convinced myself we were. We followed the sound. It kept fading in and out depending on which way the wind blew, but we kept moving toward wherever it seemed loudest. 20 minutes of that, stumbling over roots, branches scraping our arms, and then the trees thinned out and we saw it, a gravel service road. And past it, an old pickup truck parked at an angle like it had pulled off in a hurry. A man was standing next to it. Maybe 50 years old, flannel jacket, the kind of build you get from decades of manual work. He saw us before we saw him properly, and he didn't look surprised. That's the detail that still gets me. 2 kids stumble out of 600 acres of forest looking half panicked, and this man's face didn't move, like he'd been expecting someone to come out of those trees. He asked if we were lost. I said yes, we got separated from our school group. He nodded slowly and said the trail was back that way, and pointed deeper into the woods, not toward any direction we'd come from. Something in me, I still don't fully understand what, told me not to walk where he was pointing. I said thanks and I told Dylan we should try calling out again, loud, right where we stood. The man's expression changed then, just slightly. His jaw tightened. He said there was no point, nobody would hear us from here, and that he could just drive us around to the front gate himself. I want to be honest with you. Part of me almost said yes. He seemed like a normal guy, a local, probably out here for work. But Dylan grabbed my sleeve, and when I looked at him, he shook his head, just barely, eyes wide. I told the man we'd just wait by the road, that our teachers would be looking for us soon, and would probably come down this way. He stood there for a few seconds too long. Then he shrugged, got in his truck, and drove off down the gravel road. away from the direction he'd told us the trail was. The second his truck disappeared, we ran. Not toward where he'd pointed. Along the gravel road itself, the opposite direction he'd driven, because gravel roads lead somewhere, and somewhere was better than 600 acres of trees. 25 minutes later, we hit the main park entrance. Rangers were already out searching. Mrs. Kessler had noticed we were missing 8 minutes after it happened and called it in immediately. There were 4 searchers, 2 trucks, and a growing sense of panic among 40 preteens who suddenly understood their friends could vanish. When I described the man and his truck to the Rangers, one of them went quiet, real quiet. He asked me to describe the truck again, the color, anything on the plate. I only remembered part of it. He wrote it down anyway and radioed it in immediately, using words like possible person of interest, which is not something you want to hear a grown adult say about someone you just spoke to. I found out weeks later, through a conversation I wasn't supposed to overhear between my mom and a school administrator, that there had been 2 other incidents in different counties that fall. Kids approached alone near Forest Service roads by a man matching that description. Nothing was ever proven. No arrest was ever made connected to what happened to us specifically. I think about it more than I probably should. Not the forest not being lost, kids get lost, it happens, it's scary, but it ends. What stays with me is his face, how still it was, how he didn't ask if we were okay before he asked if we wanted a ride, how the direction he pointed wasn't the direction anything was. I don't know what would have happened if Dylan hadn't grabbed my sleeve. I think about that a lot too. So if you ever find yourself lost in the woods and someone finds you first, pay attention to what they ask you. Pay attention to what they don't. If you ever went on a school field trip as a kid, I need you to think back to it right now. Think about the bus ride. Think about your teacher counting kids off. Now imagine that count coming up wrong and nobody telling you why. I was 14 years old and this happened on a field trip to a state park in Pennsylvania. Nothing about that day should have gone wrong. It was a normal Tuesday in October, cold enough for jackets. We go sometimes before. We were there to learn about the local ecosystem, fill out a worksheet about tree types, and eat lunch at picnic tables before heading home. That's it. That was the whole plan. There were about 90 of us split into 4 groups, each with a teacher and 2 parent chaperones. My group had Mr. Halloway, our science teacher, and 2 moms I didn't really know. We hiked a marked trail for maybe 40 minutes, stopping so Mr. Halloway could point out oak trees and talk about soil erosion. I wasn't paying much attention. I was talking to my friend Derek about a video game, walking near the back of the group. That's when I noticed the man. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was just walking the same trail, going the opposite direction, wearing a green jacket and carrying a small backpack. Totally normal for a state park. People hike there all the time. He nodded at Mr. Halloway as he passed, and Mr. Halloway nodded back, the way strangers do. I only remember him because he looked at our group a little too long. Not creepy long, just long enough that I noticed it and then forgot about it. The way you do with 100 small things every day. We kept walking. We reached a clearing with a wooden fence around it, some kind of overlook point where you could see the valley below. Mr. Halloway told us to spread out, take pictures if we wanted, and be back at the fence in 10 minutes. Derek and I walked toward one end of the overlook. A few other kids went the other way. It felt like any other school trip. When the 10 minutes were up, Mr. Halloway called us back to do a head count, and everyone came in fine except one kid. A girl named Priya, who I didn't know well because she wasn't in my class, but I recognized her from the bus. She wasn't with the group. At first nobody panicked. Kids wander off to look at something. That happens all the time, and Mr. Halloway just called her name a few times, walked a little way down each side path, and figured she'd show up in a minute. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He started to look less annoyed and more nervous, the kind of nervous adults try to hide from kids but can't quite manage. He radioed the other groups. Nobody had seen her. He told us all to stay exactly where we were, in a tight cluster by the fence, and he and one of the chaperones went down the path calling her name louder now, not trying to hide the worry anymore. I want to explain what it's like to stand there as a kid in that situation, because I don't think people who haven't lived it really get it. You're surrounded by trees that all look the same. You know there are trails branching off in directions you didn't even notice on the way in. And you're realizing, for the first time in your life, that the adults in charge don't actually know what's happening either. That's the part that gets you. Not the woods, the adults being scared too. About 20 minutes later, park rangers showed up. I don't know who called them, maybe Mr. Halloway on his radio, maybe another teacher. 2 rangers in green uniforms came jogging up the trail, and they didn't look like they were there for a lost kid who'd wandered off to take a picture. They looked like they were already expecting the worst, which somehow made it worse for the rest of us. They asked us questions. Had anyone seen a man in the area? And that's when I remembered the guy in the green jacket, and I told them, and I watched their faces change in a way I'll never forget. One of them got on his radio immediately and started giving a description while walking fast toward the far end of the overlook. We waited by that fence for almost 2 hours. Some kids cried. Some just went quiet, the kind of quiet that's worse than crying. I remember Derek asking me over and over if I thought she was okay, and I kept saying yes because I didn't know what else to say, even though I didn't feel like it was true. Then we heard someone yell from down the slope, off the marked trail, and a few minutes later 2 rangers walked up the path carrying Priya between them. She was alive. She was shaking, crying, but alive, and they got her wrapped in a blanket almost immediately and walked her past us to a parked vehicle without letting anyone talk to her. We didn't find out what happened until weeks later, and even then it was through parents whispering to each other, not anything the school told us directly. Priya had gone to take a picture near the edge of the overlook, out of sight of the group for less than a minute, and the man in the green jacket had grabbed her and pulled her off the trail. He hadn't gotten far. Maybe he heard Mr. Halloway calling her name early. Maybe he panicked when the radios started going. Whatever it was, he left her tied to a tree less than a quarter mile from where we were standing the whole time and ran. They caught him 2 days later at a rest stop in another county, still wearing the same green jacket. I think about that day more than I think about almost anything else from being a kid. Not because of what happened to Priya, though that stays with me too. I think about it because of how close it was to being nothing. If she'd taken that picture 10 seconds later, or 10 seconds earlier. If I hadn't noticed a man on a trail for 1 extra second longer than I should have. If the rangers hadn't gotten there when they did. Every single field trip I've ever chaperoned since becoming an adult, I count the kids obsessively. I check every 10 minutes even when nobody asks me to. Parents probably think I'm uptight about it. I don't correct them because I don't want to explain why. This happened to my 8th grade class on a field trip to a historic mining site in rural Pennsylvania, is the reason I still check every exit in every building I walk into. It was November my 8th grade year, and our school had scheduled a trip to an old mining museum about 2 hours outside of town. 32 of us, 3 teachers, 1 bus driver. The kind of trip where you're more excited about sitting next to your friend than actually learning anything. The museum was this old converted mine building, half indoor exhibits, half actual tunnel you could walk through with a guide. Our tour guide was a heavyset man named Denny, mid-50s maybe, who talked in this flat, rehearsed voice like he'd given the same speech 10,000 times. We split into 2 groups because the tunnel was narrow. My group went first. 15 of us plus 1 teacher, Mrs. Halloran, plus Denny leading the way with a flashlight clipped to his belt. The tunnel dropped down at an angle, the temperature dropping with it, that wet mineral smell getting thicker the deeper we went. Somebody's phone flashlight kept flicking on and off because there was basically no signal down there. About 10 minutes in, Denny stopped us at a wider chamber and started explaining how miners used to test for gas pockets with canaries. Standard stuff. And then the lights cut out. Not just his flashlight, the overhead track lighting that ran along the tunnel ceiling, the stuff wired in for tourists, just gone. And in a mine, when the lights go, the dark isn't like regular dark. It's total. Kids started freaking out immediately. That nervous laughing kind of freak out where nobody wants to be the first to actually scream. Mrs. Halloran kept saying, "Everybody stay where you are, stay together." But you could hear her voice shaking too. And Denny just went quiet. No reassurance, no, this happens sometimes, folks. Just silence from where his voice had been 30 seconds earlier. That's when I heard the door. There was a heavy service door somewhere behind us, the one we'd walked through to enter the chamber, and I heard it swing and clank shut. Metal on metal, echoing down that tunnel. Somebody near me whispered, "Was that the door?" And nobody answered because we all knew. Mrs. Halloran started counting heads out loud in the dark, her voice cracking on the numbers. 1, 2, 3, and kids kept answering here. But some of them weren't answering fast enough, and she kept losing count and starting over. I remember gripping the strap of my backpack so hard my knuckles hurt, just needing something solid to hold on to. Then the flashlight came back on. Not the overhead lights, just Denny's flashlight, and it was pointed straight at his own face from below, which made him look like something out of a campfire story, all shadows and hollow eye sockets. And he said in that same flat, rehearsed voice, "Sorry about that, folks. Breaker trips sometimes." Like nothing had happened, like the door hadn't shut. We got the rest of the group and pushed forward, and I noticed something that I didn't mention to anyone at the time because I didn't trust what I was seeing. There was a side passage, roped off with yellow tape, and the tape had been cut. Not old and frayed, cut clean, recently, the ends still bright yellow instead of faded. I told myself the maintenance crew probably did it. I needed to believe that. We finished the tour, we got back on the bus, and I thought that was the end of it, until 3 weeks later when a story broke on the local news that the mine had been shut down entirely by the county, not for safety violations, not for structural issues, but because 2 former employees had been quietly let go after allegations that they'd been isolating tour groups in the tunnels, cutting the lights, and photographing children in the dark, using night vision equipment they weren't authorized to have. Denny's name wasn't in that report. I want to be clear about that. I have no proof it was him. No proof anything happened to my specific group beyond a blackout and a door that shut when it shouldn't have. But I've never been able to shake the timing of it. The lights, the door, the cut tape, the employees let go right after. Our school never took another field trip to that county again. The museum reopened 8 months later under new management, new safety protocols, mandatory second staff member in every tunnel group. I looked it up a few years ago out of morbid curiosity, and there's a line in the official complaint filing, paraphrased, about unauthorized isolation of miners during low visibility periods. I read that sentence probably 20 times. Maybe it really was just a breaker tripping at the worst possible moment. But I think about those cut ropes more than I'd like to admit. I think about how calm Denny's voice was in the dark, like darkness didn't bother him one bit, because he already knew exactly where everything was. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you ever chaperone a trip like that, count the heads. Keep the lights on your phone charged. And if a door closes behind you that shouldn't have, don't wait to find out why. I made it home that day. I know that for a fact. What I don't know, what I'll never know, is how close we actually came to a different story entirely. If these stories kept you up a little tonight, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment and tell me which story hit you the hardest. I read every single one. And if you like this kind of content, smash that like button. Stay safe out there. See you in the next one.